She crashed through the great hall doors and no one stopped her in time. Warriors grabbed for their spears, but she was already past them, moving through the crowd like something that had waited years for this single moment. People scrambled. Voices rose. The Alpha King turned from his throne and his guard stepped forward, but she did not slow. She crossed the stone floor, reached him before a single blade cleared its sheath, and drove the iron straight into his chest. The hall went silent. Every wolf, every warrior, every elder who had lived through wars and raids and the cruelest winters stood completely still. The Alpha King, the man whose name alone had ended rebellions, looked down at the blade buried in him. His hands moved toward it but did not pull it free. The woman holding it did not step back. She pressed it deeper and held his eyes until his knees hit the stone. Nobody knew her. Nobody recognized her face. To everyone in that hall, she was a stranger, a nameless woman who had walked in from nowhere. But in the last moment before the king fell, something crossed his face. Not rage, recognition. Who was she? How did a woman no one could name get close enough to kill the most guarded alpha in all the ancient lands? That is this story, and it begins long before she ever touched that blade. Can you already feel what this woman carried into that hall? Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. And if you want to know everything she survived to get to that moment, hit the subscribe button right now. It helps more than you know. All right, thank you. Now let us get back to the story. Few seasons. Earlier, the pack did not gather to mourn her. They gathered to watch. Dera knelt in the dirt at the center of the pack circle with her hands pressed flat against the ground and her head down. Around her, wolves stood in their human form, arms folded, faces hard. The elders sat on carved stone seats at the front. The Alpha stood above them all on the flat rock they called the Speaking Stone, and his voice carried across the valley without effort. Dera, daughter of no elder, wolf of no rank, you have been weighed by this pack and found without worth. Your wolf is weak. Your place among us produces nothing. From this moon you carry no pack mark. You answer with no name we recognize. You are Omega, and you are cast. She did not lift her head. The word cast meant something final in the ancient tongue. It was not exile with the hope of return. It was a severing. The pack bond that every wolf felt from birth, that warm thread connecting them to the collective, to the howls at night, to the shared hunts and the communal fire. That bond was cut. She felt it go. It left something hollow in her chest that no wound from a blade had ever matched. Someone spat near her hand. She rose slowly, and when she finally stood and faced them, not one person in that circle held her gaze for long. These were wolves she had run beside since childhood, women she had helped carry water from the river during dry seasons. Men whose wounds she had cleaned after border skirmishes. None of it counted now. The Alpha had spoken and the pack had agreed, and Dera was already a ghost to them before she took her first step out of the circle. The Alpha's name was Bren. He was not cruel the way warlords were cruel. He was the kind of man who believed completely in the order of things, and in that order, Omegas who could not shift fully, who could not hold their wolf form through a full hunt, who could not contribute strength to the pack, had no place. Dera had tried to shift completely for 3 seasons. Her wolf came but never stayed. It flickered like a fire in wet wood. She would begin the change, feel her bones begin to move, and then something in her would pull back and she would collapse back into her human skin, shaking and ashamed. She had never understood why. Neither had the pack healers. After a while, they stopped trying to understand and started treating it as a defect. And a defective wolf in a pack that survived on strength and coordination was a weight no one wanted to carry. Bren had given her longer than most alphas would have. She knew that. It did not make the casting hurt less. She walked out of the valley with nothing except the hide wrap on her back and a small iron knife her mother had left her before dying seasons ago. The knife was old. The handle was worn smooth from years of use. It was the only thing in the world that was entirely hers. She did not look back. The borderlands between pack territories were not safe for a lone wolf, especially one with no pack mark and no alpha scent to warn off strangers. Dara moved through the tree lines and stayed away from open ground. She ate what she could find and drank from streams and slept in the hollows of large roots where nothing could approach her from behind. On the fourth night, she heard howling to the east, not a hunt howl, a patrol howl, which meant a pack boundary was close. She changed direction. On the seventh night, she found the old woman. She was sitting beside a low fire in a shallow cave, grinding something between two flat stones, and she did not look up when Dara stopped at the cave entrance. She simply said, "Sit or go. I will not ask twice." Dara sat. The woman's name was Kora. She was ancient in the way very few wolves ever became ancient, which meant she had outlived several alphas and at least 2 pack wars and had stopped caring about the opinions of the living somewhere along the way. Her wolf, she told Dara that first night, had not surfaced in many seasons, not because it was gone, but because she no longer needed it. "What do you mean you no longer need it?" Dara asked. "I mean I chose when to use it and when not to. That is different from not having it." Kora looked at her across the fire. "You cannot hold your shift." It was not a question. "No," Dara said, "because you fight it." Dara opened her mouth and closed it again. "Every wolf I have ever seen who could not hold the shift was fighting something inward," Kora said. "The wolf does not fail. The person holding the wolf fails. They are afraid of what the wolf is, or what it will do, or what it means, that it came." She went back to her grinding. "What are you afraid of?" Dara stared at the fire for a long time. "I do not know." "Then that is where we begin." She stayed with Kora through 2 full seasons. In that time, she learned things the pack had never taught her. Kora did not teach the way pack elders taught, with commands and demonstrations and punishment for failure. She taught by asking questions and then going silent and waiting for Dara to find the answer herself. It was maddening at first. Then it became the most useful thing anyone had ever done for her. Dara learned that her wolf had not been weak. It had been waiting. Every time she had tried to shift in front of the pack, in front of Bren, in front of the eyes that were already judging her before her bones had finished moving, she had reached inward and found not her wolf but her own fear wrapped around it like a fist. The wolf could not come through a closed fist. The first time she shifted fully in the forest beside Kora's cave, it was night, and there was no one watching, and she was not trying to prove anything. She simply breathed and let go, and the wolf came through completely. She stood in the dark on 4 legs and felt the ground under her paws, and the air full of information her human senses never caught. She stayed in that form until dawn without effort. When she shifted back, she sat on the ground and did not speak for a long time. Kora handed her dried meat and said nothing. But Kora taught her more than the shift. She taught her how to move without sound, how to read a man's weight and know which direction he would fall before he moved, how to use a blade not with strength but with placement. She had lived long enough to see that strength was the weapon of those who had many options. Precision was the weapon of those who had only one. Dara was not large. She would never overpower a warrior in open combat, but by the time the second season with Kora ended, she could put a blade exactly where she intended from distances that surprised even the old woman. "You have a gift," Kora told her one evening, "not for killing, for deciding. Most people hesitate at the last moment. You do not." "I have nothing left to lose," Dara said. Kora looked at her steadily. "That is not why. People with nothing to lose hesitate most of all because they are hoping something will change before they have to act. You do not hesitate because you have already accepted what is coming before it arrives." She paused. "That is rare, and it is dangerous. Make sure you aim it at the right target." Dara turned the old iron knife in her hands. "How will I know the right target?" Kora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You will know because it will be the one thing that, if you do not do it, nothing else you ever do will matter." It was near the end of the second season that the traders came through the borderlands with news. Dara heard it while she was collecting water from the stream below the cave. Two men moving between pack territories, carrying hides and dried grain, stopped to rest at the stream bank and talked freely because they did not see her crouched in the reeds upstream. The Alpha King had called a gathering, not a council, not a border meeting. A full gathering of every pack in the ancient lands, which had not happened in living memory. The king's name was Roan, and he ruled from the high seat at Duncrag, the fortress built into the mountain that no pack had ever successfully raided. His words were the best. When he called a gathering, packs came, or they ceased to exist. The traders said the gathering was about expansion. Roan wanted to push the pack territories further north and take the hunting grounds that 3 smaller packs currently occupied. The smaller packs would be absorbed or destroyed. It depended on whether they submitted. One trader said it quietly, as if saying it too loudly would make it more real. He already sent wolves to the Maran pack last moon. None came back to their families. Dara set the water vessel down slowly. The Maran pack was the pack her mother had come from before she joined Bren's pack through a mating bond. Dara had never been welcomed there, but she had a cousin in the Maran pack, a young woman named Sullie, who had sent word twice through travelling traders in the early seasons when Dara was still struggling with her shift, just to say she was thinking of her. She left the water vessel at the stream and went back to the cave. Kora was already watching her when she walked in. The old woman read faces the way wolves read wind. "What did you hear?" Kora asked. Dara told her. Kora was quiet for a long time. The fire between them burned low and neither of them moved to feed it. "Roan," Kora finally said, and the way she said the name carried something old in it, something that had been sitting in the woman's chest for many seasons. "You know him," Dara said. "I knew his father, and I knew what his father did to build that throne." Kora looked at the dying fire. "Roan is worse. His father was taken by force. Roan takes and makes you believe you consented." She paused. "He is the kind of power that does not stop. It must be stopped." Dara looked at the iron knife resting beside her sleeping mat. She thought about the hollow in her chest where the pack bond used to be. She thought about Sullie. She thought about the traders' voices and the careful way they had spoken, like men who were already afraid and did not yet know what of. She thought about what Kora had told her. You will know the right target because it will be the one thing that, if you do not do it, nothing else will matter. She picked up the knife. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Kora watched her and did not try to stop her, and that was the only answer Dara needed. She would go to the gathering. She would walk into whatever Roan had built at Duncrag. She did not know yet exactly how it would end, but she knew that somewhere between the borderlands and that mountain fortress, she would find out what she was made of, and the Alpha King would find out too. She had not walked 3 days from Kora's cave before someone tried to kill her. He came from the trees to her left, already mid-shift when she heard the first branch snap. By the time he landed on 4 paws and charged, she had already moved sideways off the path, and the wolf flew past her and hit the ground rolling. He came back up fast and turned, and she was standing still with the knife out watching him. He shifted back to his human form and stood breathing hard. He was young. Younger than she expected. His pack mark was cut into the side of his neck, a series of lines that told her he belonged to a southern pack called the Veth. He was not a warrior by his build. He was a scout. "You are walking toward Duncrag alone," he said. It came out almost like an accusation. "Yes," Dara said. "No one walks to Duncrag alone." "And yet here I am walking." He looked at her the way people looked at things they could not place. No pack mark on her skin, no escort, no wagon or trade goods. Just a woman on the road with an iron knife and a hide pack, and the kind of stillness that made people uncomfortable. "Roan's men are checking everyone on this road," he said. "They are turning back anyone without a pack mark or a sealed invitation from their alpha. A lone wolf with no mark will not get through the gates." Dara considered this. "Why are you telling me?" The scout was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in his face. "Because my alpha sent me ahead to count how many of Roan's checkpoints there are between here and the mountain. I have counted 4. And at each one I saw them take people." He paused. "Not turn them back. He'd take them." "Take them where?" "I do not know. They do not come back down the road." Dara lowered the knife but did not put it away. "What is your name?" "Pell," he said. "Pell, go back to your alpha and give your count. This is not your road to die on." He shook his head slowly. "My alpha is already dead. Roan's messengers came to our village 6 nights ago. They said he refused the summons. By morning he was gone, and the elders were bowing to a man Roan sent to replace him." He looked at his own hands. "I have nowhere to go back to." The trees around them were quiet. Wind moved through the upper branches. Somewhere far off, a bird called once and went silent. Dara made a decision the way Kora had taught her, without turning it over too many times. "Then walk with me, but understand something before you do. Where I am going, I do not expect to return from. If you are looking for survival, I am in the wrong company." Pell looked at her for a long moment. "What are you looking for?" "One clean moment," she said. "That is all." He fell into step beside her. They reached the first checkpoint before nightfall. 4 of Roan's wolves stood across the road in human form, armed with spears and wearing the king's mark burned into their forearms. Behind them 2 large wolves sat on their haunches, watching the road with the particular stillness of trained animals waiting for a command. Pell had a sealed clay token from his dead alpha, which was old but still carried the pack emblem. It was enough to get him through with a hard look and a search of his pack. For Dara, he spoke before she could. "She is my pack's healer," he said. "Her mark was burned off in a fire 2 seasons ago. She has no token because she was not expected to make this journey. Our alpha sent her ahead to prepare medicines for the gathering." The guard looked at Dara's unmarked skin for a long time. She held his gaze and said nothing. She did not shrink. She did not explain herself further. She simply waited with the patience of someone who had already decided that this man's opinion of her did not determine her next step. He let them through. When they were far enough down the road, Pell exhaled. You did not even look worried. I was not. You should have been. If he had called your story false, they would have taken us both. He was not going to call it false, Dara said. He wanted to get back to standing still. Men like that do not want problems, or they want the day to pass. Pell was quiet for a moment. Where did you learn to read people that way? From an old woman who had watched enough of them die to stop being impressed. They camped off the road that night in a narrow ravine where the rock walls blocked wind and firelight. Pell built the fire small and low without being asked. He was more capable than his youth suggested. Over the fire he told her about his pack. The Veth had been a small pack, not wealthy, not powerful, but stable. They had held their territory for 4 generations without a war. Their alpha, a man named Dos, had been the kind of leader who settled disputes with words before weapons. When Roan's summons came, Dos had said openly that a king who summoned and did not request was a king preparing to conquer, not to govern. He had said it to the wrong ears. He had a daughter, Pell said. She was 3 seasons old. Dara did not ask what happened to the daughter. The way he stopped talking told her enough. She fed a stick into the fire. What do you know about Roan himself? Not the stories people tell to frighten children. What is true? Pell thought carefully. He has not shifted in public in many seasons. Some say his wolf is enormous, the largest anyone has seen. Others say he does not shift because he no longer needs to. That he has become so powerful, he uses other wolves the way a man uses a spear. He does not fight, he directs. Every man fights when the blade is close enough, Dara said. His guards never let a blade get close. They did not let me get close either, she said. And yet, here we are past the first checkpoint. Pell looked at her across the fire. What exactly are you planning to do when you reach Duncrag? She was quiet for a long moment. An owl called somewhere above the ravine. The fire between them popped once and settled. I am going to walk into his hall, she said. And then we will see. He did not push further. He had the sense to understand that some answers were not ready to be spoken yet. The second checkpoint was more dangerous than the first. The guard captain there was a broad woman with sharp eyes and the kind of attention that could not be distracted with stillness and patience. She separated Dara and Pell immediately and questioned them apart. Dara stood before her and held the story together without flinching, adding details that made it feel lived in rather than invented. The fire that had burned her mark had happened in her pack's eastern grain store. 3 others had been injured. The healer before her had died in the same fire, and she had taken over the role. Her hands showed it, she said, and she held them out. Years of handling roots and iron tools had left them rough and marked in ways that matched the story without her having planned it. The captain stared at her hands for a long time. Then she looked up at Dara's face and said, You are not afraid. Should I be? Dara said. Everyone is afraid at my checkpoint. Then perhaps everyone at your checkpoint has something to hide. It was a dangerous thing to say. She knew it when she said it, but it landed the right way because it carried no defiance in the tone, only simple logic. Anne the captain was the kind of woman who respected logic more than submission. She waved Dara through. Pell caught up with her on the far side and said nothing for a full stretch of road. Then he said, You are either very skilled or completely without fear. They are the same thing, Dara said. On the 3rd day they found the bodies. They were off the road, in the tree line, partially covered with branches in the hurried way of people who wanted to hide something but did not have enough time to do it properly. 6 wolves in human form. Pack marks from 3 different packs. All of them had been killed cleanly. A single wound each, the kind of wound made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Pell crouched beside the nearest one. "These are from the Marin pack," he said quietly. Dara went still. She looked at the face of the nearest body. It was a man she did not know, but the Marin pack mark on his neck was unmistakable. She moved to the next one, and the next. On the 4th body, she stopped. It was not Sullie. The face was older, a woman perhaps 30 seasons, with the kind of hands that suggested a life of physical work. But around her neck, tied with a thin cord of dried grass, was a small carved stone token of the kind Maran women made for their daughters when they came of age. Dara had one exactly like it. Her mother had carried it from the Maran pack when she left. She untied it from the dead woman's neck and held it in her palm. Pell stood behind her and said nothing. She closed her fingers around the token. The hollow place in her chest that the casting had made shifted into something different, not emptier, heavier. The kind of weight that does not slow a person down but instead presses them forward because standing still under it becomes impossible. "We need to move," she said. "Dara." Pell's voice was careful. If Roan is already killing pack wolves on the road before the gathering even begins, then walking into that hall is not a mission. It is death. She turned and looked at him, and he went quiet. "I know what it is," she said. She put the token around her own neck and walked back to the road. The mountain appeared that evening, massive and dark against the sky, with Duncrag sitting at its shoulder like something that had grown from the rock rather than been built. Torches burned along the fortress walls. Even from this distance, she could see the movement of guards on the parapets. Wolves on patrol, some in human form, some shifted, moving in the practiced way of animals trained for war. Every pack that had received Roan's summons was required to arrive at the eastern gate by the following dawn. The gathering would begin at midday. Dara had counted the checkpoints, learned the rhythms of the guards, and watched how people moved through the process of arrival. By the time they reached the final approach, she had a shape in her mind of how Duncrag worked. Pell walked beside her, and she could feel his tension like heat from a fire. He was brave, she had decided, not the kind of brave that was loud and certain, but the quieter kind that kept moving, even when it knew the full weight of what was ahead. "When we get inside," she said, "stay near the edges. Watch the wolves who are not watching the gathering. Those are the ones to worry about. And you?" he said. I will be where I need to be." He grabbed her arm and stopped her walking. His grip was not rough. It was the grip of someone trying to make a real moment out of a conversation that kept sliding towards strategy and away from truth. "Why you?" he said. "There are warriors here from 12 packs. Men twice your size who have lost people to Roan the same as you. Why are you holding that blade and not one of them?" Dara looked at him. "Because none of them were cast out," she said. "They still have something to protect, a pack to go back to, a name to carry. I have nothing. And a woman with nothing is the most dangerous thing in any hall because she has already paid the highest price before she ever walks in." Pell released her arm slowly. The mountain sat ahead of them, dark and enormous and full of the things she had come to find. She walked toward it. The eastern gate swallowed them at dawn with 100 other wolves. Pack representatives moved through in groups, each one announced by a gate elder who checked clay tokens and pack marks and recorded arrivals on stretched hide. Dara and Pell entered with a group of 6 from a northern pack who had lost half their escort on the road and were too exhausted and grieving to pay attention to 2 extra bodies falling beside them. Nobody checked twice. Nobody asked. Inside the walls, Duncrag was larger than it appeared from the road. The fortress had been carved into the mountain over many generations, each Alpha King adding to what the last had built until it became less a stronghold and more a small settlement of stone. There were yards for animals, storage caves cut into the lower rock, sleeping quarters built against the inner walls, and at the centre of everything the Great Hall, wide and long with a roof of heavy timber and walls thick enough to muffle sound from outside completely. Wolves moved everywhere, some in human form, some shifted and patrolling on 4 legs through the outer yards. The shifted wolves wore no mark but carried themselves with the precision of trained soldiers, their movements too coordinated to be anything but commanded. Pell stayed close without being told. Dara moved through the arriving crowd and watched everything without appearing to watch anything. She noted the guard rotations. She noted which doors were watched and which were not. She noted the position of the Great Hall entrance and the 2 wolves stationed at it in full shift, enormous animals sitting perfectly still on either side of the doors like carved stone that breathed. But what she had not expected was the smell. Not the smell of wolves or fire or the packed animal scent of too many people in an enclosed space. Something underneath all of that. Old blood. Not recent. Seasons old, soaked into the stone itself. This was a place where violence had happened many times and the walls had absorbed it so completely it had become part of the fortress's nature. She filed that away and kept moving. A herald announced the gathering would begin at midday in the Great Hall. Until then, representatives were expected to remain in the outer yards and speaking grounds. Food was distributed, dried meat and hard grain cakes. Enough to show hospitality without generosity. Dara ate without tasting it and watched the hall doors. It was Pell who first noticed the woman watching them. "Behind you," he said quietly. "Or against the water trough." "She has been looking at us since the gate." Dara did not turn immediately. She finished chewing, set down the grain cake, and then turned slowly, as if looking at the yard generally. The woman was perhaps 10 seasons older than Dara. She was lean with a packmark Dara did not recognize, and the kind of face that had learned to show nothing as a matter of survival. She was alone. No group around her, no escort, no one she appeared to belong to. Their eyes met, and the woman did not look away. That was interesting. Most people, when caught watching, looked somewhere else. This woman held the contact and then tilted her head very slightly toward the narrow passage between 2 storage buildings to her left. An invitation. Or a trap. Dara went. The passage was tight and shadowed, decutting between 2 buildings and opening at the back into a small yard used for storing firewood. The woman was already there when Dara arrived, standing with her back to the wall and her arms loose at her sides. "You have no pack," the woman said, not an accusation, an observation. "Neither do you," Dara said. The woman almost smiled. "My name is Wren. I came from the Dial Pack, or what remains of it. Roan dissolved us 2 seasons past and scattered what was left of our wolves among his border patrols. I escaped before they could assign me." She paused. "I have been inside Duncrag for 4 days. I arrived with a trader group before the gathering summons brought everyone else." "Why?" Wren looked at her steadily. "The same reason you are here, I think." The air between them sat still. "You do not know why I am here," Dara said. "Ah, you move like someone who has already made peace without leaving," Wren said. "I have seen that walk before. I wore it myself when I first arrived. Then I spent 4 days inside these walls and learned things that changed my approach." She crossed her arms. "Roan does not sit at the head of the hall during the gathering. He enters from the eastern passage behind the throne after the hall is full. He walks the length of the hall alone to reach the throne. His guards do not walk with him for that stretch because it is theatre. He wants every pack representative to see him approach unguarded and unthreatened. It is how he demonstrates that he fears nothing." Dara was quiet. "That walk from the eastern passage to the throne," Wren continued, "is the only moment in Duncrag where Roan is not surrounded." "Why are you telling me this?" Wren uncrossed her arms and showed the inside of her left forearm. A scar ran the length of it. Not a wound scar, a mark scar, the deliberate kind made when someone burns away a pack mark. "Because I had a daughter in the Dael pack. She was 8 seasons old when Roan dissolved us. I never found her after the scattering." She let Dara look at the scar for a moment, then lowered her arm. "I have been waiting for someone with the right kind of stillness to walk through that gate, someone who was not going to flinch." Dara thought about the stone token around her neck. "I will need to be inside the hall before he enters," Dara said. "I know a way in through the timber store that connects to the hall's inner wall. There is a gap behind the hanging skins near the eastern passage entrance. You can be inside and already positioned before the doors open for the gathering." Wren looked at her. "But there is something else you need to know." "Tell me." "Roan knows someone is here to kill him." The firewood yard went very quiet. "One of the arriving wolves," Wren said, "a man from the Seth pack, was taken by Roan's guards last night after he arrived. I watched from the storage roof. He was brought to the hall and did not come out. This morning, the guard rotations changed. They added 2 shifted wolves inside the hall itself, positioned near the eastern passage." Dara looked at the wall above Wren's head and thought quickly. "Then the walk from the passage to the throne is no longer unguarded." "No. But the throne itself still is for one moment. When Roan sits, his guards take position behind the throne. There is a breath between when he sits and when they reach him." Wren paused. A very short breath. "Short enough," Dara said. Wren studied her face. "You understand what I am saying. You will be in a hall full of pack wolves who do not know you. The moment you move, every guard in that room will be on you." "I know." "And you are still going to do it." Dara looked at her. "You said you were waiting for someone who would not flinch. Stop checking if I am that person and start showing me the way through the timber store." Wren held her gaze for one more moment. Then she turned and walked toward the back of the firewood yard. The timber store entrance was a low door cut into the base of the hall's outer wall, used by the workers who fed the great fire inside. At mid-morning, it was empty. Workers had already loaded the fire before the gathering preparations began and would not return until evening. Wren led Dara through the stacked timber, navigating by memory in the low light, until they reached the inner wall where the hanging skins Wren had described fell in heavy folds from ceiling to floor. Behind the third skin from the left, a gap in the stone wide enough for a person to stand ran parallel to the hall interior. Dara stepped in and looked through the gap. The hall was empty but already arranged for the gathering. Stone seats in rows facing the throne. The throne itself was simple by the standards of powerful men, a wide seat of dark timber on a raised platform of flat stone, which somehow made it more intimidating than decoration would have. Power that did not need to announce itself was power that had never been seriously challenged. The eastern passage opened to the right of the throne. She could see the door. She measured the distance with her eyes. Wren's hand appeared through the gap and pressed something into hers. A second blade, shorter than Dera's iron knife, with a bone handle worn smooth. In case the first does not reach him, Wren said quietly. Dera closed her fingers around it. Where will you be? Dera asked. Near the hall entrance. If the doors seal before you can reach him, I will open them again. A pause. Or I will do something loud enough to pull the guard's attention for one moment. However it needs to go. Wren. Dera turned to look at her through the gap. You said you changed your approach when you learned things inside these walls. What did you learn? Wren was quiet for a long moment. The light in the timber store was pale and steady. I learned that Roan is not just a cruel king, she said finally. He is building something. The gathering is not about expansion. He is going to announce the absorption of every remaining independent pack under a single law. His law. Any alpha who refuses will be declared rogue and hunted. He already has the wolves in position to do it. She paused. If he speaks those words at midday today, it will be done before anyone can organize against it. Pack alphas will submit because they will be surrounded by his wolves with nowhere to go. Dera turned back to look at the empty throne. Then he cannot speak those words, she said. She stood in the gap behind the skin for 2 full hours while the hall filled. She heard the pack representatives arrive. The sounds of stone seats filling, low voices, the particular tension of people who had travelled far and arrived uncertain. She heard the hall doors close, she heard the herald call for silence, and then she heard the eastern passage door open. Footsteps, one set, unhurried. She gripped the iron knife and moved. She is already inside and he is already walking. Do you think she will reach him in time before those guards close the gap? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. If your heart is hammering right now, you are exactly where this story wants you. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us. Roan was not what she had built in her mind during the long walk to Duncrag. She had expected something monstrous, a man shaped by cruelty into something that looked the part. What she saw when she stepped from behind the hanging skin into the corridor of the eastern passage was a man of middle age, broad across the shoulders, with a face that was almost unremarkable. No visible scars, no performance of danger in how he carried himself. He walked toward his throne the way a man walked to a meal, certain of where he was going and unbothered by what was waiting there. That was the most frightening thing about him. 2 shifted wolves followed at a distance behind him, close enough to respond but far enough back to preserve the theatre of his solitary approach. She had perhaps 4 steps of clear space between him and them. She came out of the passage corridor fast and low. He heard her, his head turned before she reached him, and for a single moment their eyes met. And she saw something move in his face. Not fear. Recognition of a kind. The recognition of a man who had been told someone was coming and was now looking at that someone and making a rapid calculation about whether the threat was real. He decided it was not. That was his only mistake. He began to raise his hand for the guards, and she was already inside his reach. The knife driving upward and inward, and the blade went into his side between the ribs. Not the killing strike. Not yet. Because his hand, still rising, caught her wrist before she could drive it deeper, and his grip was enormous. The grip of a man whose physical strength was genuine and not performed. And he wrenched her arm sideways, and the knife turned in the wound instead of going further. He did not cry out. That surprised her. Most men cried out. He looked down at the blade in his side and then looked at her face with the same careful attention he had given the empty throne before sitting at it, as if he was still in the process of gathering information before making a decision. "You are not from any pack here," he said. His voice was level. Blood was already coming through his robe, but he held her wrist and did not move toward the guards. Behind him, the two wolves had stopped. She could hear them breathing. They were waiting for his signal. "Give the signal," she said, "and I pull this blade across before your guards reach me." His grip on her wrist tightened. "What pack cast you?" he said. That stopped her for half a breath. It was not the question she had expected. Not a command, not a threat. A question. And it was the right question, which meant he had looked at her unmarked skin and read it correctly. "That is not your concern," she said. "You came alone into my hall to kill me," he said. "Everything about you is my concern." He shifted his grip slightly, and the movement sent white pain up her arm, but she held the knife steady. "I have had 17 attempts on my life. Every one of them was sent by someone, paid or ordered or manipulated into it. You are the first one who came in with nothing." He paused. No pack, no sponsor, no signal from the door. The hall on the other side of the hanging skins was completely silent. The gathering crowd had heard something, but the thick walls were doing their work, and no one yet knew what. "Who sent you?" Roan said. "No one," Dara said. "Then why?" She pushed the knife and he absorbed the pain without flinching, and his grip on her wrist became something close to bone-breaking. "The Maran pack," she said through her teeth. "The Veth pack, the Dial pack. Every wolf you scattered or killed or took from their children." She pushed harder. "That is who sent me." Something shifted in his face, not the recognition from before, something older. His grip loosened by a fraction, just a fraction, but it was enough. She drove the knife the rest of the way. He released her wrist. The two wolves behind him surged forward and she was already moving, not toward the hall, not toward the passage, but straight up onto the throne platform, putting the raised stone between herself and the wolves. Roan was on one knee. He had not fallen yet. He was still holding himself up with one hand on the arm of the throne, and his head was down, and he was breathing in the specific way of a man counting the breaths he had left. The wolves pulled up short at the base of the platform. Trained animals did not act without command, and their commander had not given one. The door behind the hanging skins burst open. Every pack representative in the hall was on their feet. The noise hit all at once, voices and the sound of benches overturning, and the low, warning growls of wolves beginning to shift. Guards poured in from 3 entrances. Dara stood on the platform above all of it, with the bloody knife in her hand and the second blade Ren had given her already out, and she faced the hall. No one moved toward her. Not because they could not. Because something had stopped them that was not fear of the blade. It was the image itself. A lone, unmarked woman standing above a dying king on his own throne platform, in his own hall, surrounded by his own wolves, and none of his strength had been enough. Pearl was at the far end of the hall near the main doors. She could see him in the crowd, standing very still with his eyes on her. Roan spoke. Everyone heard it because the hall had gone that quiet. "Who are you?" He was still on one knee, still holding the throne arm. His voice had lost its level of quality and became something raw. She looked down at him. "No one," she said. "That is exactly who I am." He looked up at her face, and the recognition from the passage was back, sharper now. the recognition of a man who had spent his entire reign surrounded by people who wanted something from him, power or mercy or favor, and was now looking at the single person in his life who had wanted only this one thing and nothing beyond it. He fell. Not dramatically. He simply stopped holding himself up, and the stone floor received him, and the hall remained completely silent for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then it broke. Guards rushed the platform from both sides, and Dara did not run. She held her ground and took the first guard's spear shaft across her forearm and used his momentum to spin past him and put the second blade at the throat of the guard behind him. She was not trying to fight her way out. She was trying to survive long enough for what came next. What came next was Ren. The hall doors blew open and Ren came through them in full shift. A large, dark wolf moving at speed through the crowd, not attacking but scattering, forcing guards to break their rush toward the platform to avoid the animal tearing through their formation. 3 pack representatives shifted in response to the wolf in their midst, and the hall became chaos in the space of a single breath. In the chaos, Pell reached the platform. He grabbed Dara's arm and pulled, and she let him pull her because the guards were reorganizing and the window was closing fast. They ran along the side wall, following Ren's path through the scattered crowd, reaching the open doors and breaking into the outer yard as the hall behind them erupted into the full noise of wolves shifting and guards shouting commands and the particular chaos of a gathering that had just watched its king fall. The yard was not clear. 2 guards shifted the moment they came through the doors and landed on 4 paws between them and the gate. Pell shifted. She had not seen him shift before. He was not large in human form, but his wolf was different, low to the ground and fast, built for endurance rather than power, and he hit the nearer guard wolf before the animal had fully oriented, and the 2 of them went rolling sideways off the path. Dara ran. Ren was ahead of her, shifted back to human form at the gate, pulling the iron bar free from the latch with both hands, and the gate opened outward onto the mountain road. Dara went through it. Ren went through behind her. Pell broke free from the guard wolf and came through last, shifting back as he ran so that by the time they hit the road he was human again and breathing hard. They ran down the mountain road without speaking. Behind them Duncrag was alive with sound, howls carrying in every direction, the signal howls of wolves spreading news to the outer patrols. The mountain air was cold and the road was steep, and none of them slowed down. After a long stretch, Pell said between breaths, "Is he dead?" "Yes," Dara said. "You are certain?" "Yes." He ran beside her for another stretch, then he said, "What happens now to the packs? To the gathering?" Without Roan, Dara thought about the hall full of pack representatives who had just watched the most powerful Alpha King in the ancient lands fall to a nameless woman's blade. She thought about the Alphas who had come to that gathering already afraid, already half-submitted, already preparing to give up whatever Roan demanded. She thought about what it meant for them to have seen what they saw. "They go home," she said, "and they tell what happened. And every pack that was afraid of Roan's name will have to decide what they are afraid of now that the name is gone." Ren, running on her other side, said nothing, but she reached out and pressed something into Dara's hand without slowing. A small carved stone token on a cord of dried grass. Dara looked at it as she ran. It was identical to the one around her neck. She looked at Ren. "Oh, Sullie was my cousin's daughter," Ren said. "She made tokens for the women she loved. Your mother was her mother's closest friend." She kept running. "She is alive. I found her in the eastern border settlement 2 seasons ago. I left her there because it was safer than keeping her with me. She paused. I will take you to her when we are clear of this mountain. Dara closed her fingers around the token and ran. The mountain fell away behind them. The road opened into the borderland trees, and the three of them disappeared into the tree line as the first patrol howls reached the lower slopes. Above them, Duncrag burned with noise, and the ancient lands had just changed in a way that no one inside those walls yet had the words for. They did not stop running until the trees closed completely over the road and the howls from the mountain became distant enough to be wind. Pell found a stream and they followed it east, moving through the water to break their scent trail, the way hunted wolves had done since the first pack wars. Wren moved with the efficiency of someone who had been running and hiding for 2 seasons and knew exactly how much effort to spend and where. Dara moved on instinct, her body still carrying the heat of what had happened in the hall, her mind already past it and working on what came next. They came out of the stream onto dry rock, and Pell immediately collapsed against a boulder and put his head back and breathed. Give me a moment, he said. Take 2, Dara said. She was scanning the tree line behind them. Wren crouched beside the stream and washed her hands and face without urgency. She had the manner of a woman who had already processed fear so many times that it had become background noise she no longer gave full attention to. They will send trackers before midday, Wren said. Roan's tracker wolves are the best in the ancient lands, trained from pup age for exactly this. Water breaks the scent, but not for long if they are good. How many? Dara asked. He kept 6 tracker pairs at Duncrag at all times. Each pair is 1 shifted wolf and 1 human reader who interprets what the wolf finds. She looked up. They will move fast and they will not come alone. Pell lifted his head. So we cannot outrun them. No, Wren said. Then we need to split, Dara said. Both of them looked at her. Been 3 people leaving 1 trail are easier to follow than 3 people leaving 3 trails, she said. If we separate here and each takes a different direction, they have to split their trackers to follow all 3. 6 pairs become 2 pairs per trail. And 2 pairs can be managed. Pell sat up straighter. Managed how? We are not fighters. You shifted in that yard and took down a trained guard wolf, Dara said. Do not tell me what you are not. He looked at his hands. I got lucky. You made a decision, and you moved. That is not luck. She turned to Wren. The eastern border settlement where Sullie is. How many days from here? 4 days east on foot. 2 if you push through the night. I will push through the night. Dara looked between them. Pell goes north toward what remains of the Veth territory. Even dissolved. There will be wolves there who remember Doss and will shelter him. Wren goes south and loops back east after 2 days, which will draw 1 tracker pair wide and waste their time. She paused. I go straight east. Wren stood slowly. They will expect straight east. You are the one they want most. I know, Dara said. Let them come straight for me. I will be ready. Pell looked at her with the expression he had worn on the road when she had told him she was not expecting to return. It was the expression of someone trying to decide if the person in front of them was remarkably brave or simply no longer attached to the outcome of their own survival. You just killed the Alpha King, he said. You could disappear. Find a place no one knows your face. Start something new. Dara looked at the stone token around her neck. I have something to find first. He nodded slowly. He did not argue further. He had learned on the road that arguing with her was a way of using time without changing anything. They stood at the stream edge, and for a moment none of them spoke. They had come together by accident, and survived by a combination of preparation and chaos, and the specific courage of people who had nothing left to lose. There was something in that which did not need to be spoken to be understood. Wren put her hand briefly on Dera's arm. Not a farewell gesture. Something more practical. A confirmation. Then she turned south and walked into the trees. Pell looked at Dera one more time. "If you find a way to survive this," he said, "go north eventually. I will rebuild something worth finding." "I will remember that," she said. He shifted mid-stride and his wolf hit the ground running and disappeared north through the tree line without looking back. Dera turned east and walked. The first tracker found her before noon. She heard it before she saw it, the particular silence that fell in a forest when a trained hunting wolf entered it, every small animal and bird going still in response to something that moved with predatory purpose. She did not run. She climbed. The tree she chose was old and wide with branches beginning low enough to reach. She went up quickly and settled into a fork 15 feet above the ground and went still and waited. The tracker wolf came into the clearing below her 4 minutes later. It was enormous, dark-coated and low-headed, moving in the specific grid pattern of a trained search animal, covering ground in overlapping passes. Behind it, at a distance of 20 paces, came the human reader, a lean man with a strip of hide over one eye and a long knife on his hip, watching the wolf's body language with the attention of someone translating a language in real time. The wolf hit her scent trail and its whole body changed. Head down, pace quickening, moving east along the exact line she had walked. She watched it pass below her and kept still. The reader followed, his single eye scanning the ground ahead of the wolf. He passed directly beneath her branch without looking up. Trackers read the ground. They rarely read the canopy because prey animals ran. Prey animals did not climb and wait. She let them move 30 paces east of her position and then came down from the tree and went north for 100 paces before cutting east again, crossing her own trail above where the wolf had picked it up. When the wolf circled back, which trained animals always did when a trail ended suddenly, it would find the crossing and have 2 directions to choose from. That would cost them time. Not enough time, but some. She ran east and did not slow. By late afternoon, the trees thinned and she entered the open scrubland that ran between the mountain forests and the eastern river valleys. Open ground was dangerous but faster, and she needed faster now. She kept to the low ground, following the dry creek beds and the shallow ditches that ran between the scrub, staying below the sight line of anything watching from higher ground. She crossed a low ridge as the sun dropped and saw the river valley spread below her, wide and brown and flat, and on the near bank, a settlement of low buildings surrounded by a thorn fence. The eastern border settlement. She stood on the ridge and watched it for a long time before descending. No movement on the fence line that suggested guards on alert. No signal fires. No wolves on the outer ground. Whatever chaos was spreading from Duncrag had not yet reached this far east. She went down. The gate was a heavy timber frame with a sliding bar, tended by an old man who looked at her unmarked skin with the practiced neutrality of a border settlement elder who had seen every kind of person come through and learned that asking questions only invited lies. "I am looking for a woman named Sullie," Dera said. "She came from the Marin pack." The old man studied her face. "Who are you to her?" Dera touched the token at her neck. Her mother's cousin's daughter. He looked at the token for a long moment. Then he opened the gate. Sullie was not what Dera had expected. She had built a picture in her mind from the 2 messages sent through traders in the early seasons, the voice of a young woman reaching out across distance to someone she had been told to think of as kin. She had expected someone young and uncertain, shaped by displacement into something fragile. Sullie was perhaps 20 seasons old, and she was neither young-seeming nor fragile. She was sitting outside a low building at the settlement centre, working a hide with a bone scraper, and she looked up when Dara approached and stopped working immediately. She looked at Dara's face and then at the token and then back at the face. "You are the one Wren told me about," Sullie said. Dara stopped. "Wren told you about me?" 2 seasons passed. She said someone would come eventually. Sullie set the scraper down and stood. She was taller than Dara. Her pack mark was the Maran mark, still visible on her neck, not burned away or hidden. She wore it without apology. She said you were the kind of person who moved toward things instead of away from them. She said when you came, it would mean something had changed. Dara looked at this young woman who had survived a pack dissolution and a border scattering and 2 seasons in a settlement at the edge of the known lands, and was sitting calmly scraping hides as if the world were a manageable place. "Something has changed," Dara said. Sullie read her face the way Kora used to read faces, quickly and completely. "Roan." "Yes." Sullie sat back down. She picked up the scraper. She worked the hide in 3 long strokes and then set it down again and looked at her hands. "The Maran pack," she said quietly. "Can they come back from what he did to them?" "I do not know," Dara said, "but the thing that was stopping them is gone." Sullie nodded slowly. She looked up. "Sit down. You have been running. I can see it." Dara sat on the ground beside her, and for the first time since she had left Kora's cave, she allowed herself to stop moving and simply be in a place without calculating the exits. It was strange. It felt like putting down something very heavy that she had carried so long she had forgotten it had weight. She slept that night in the settlement for the first time in many seasons in a place that felt like it might be safe. She did not sleep easily. Her body had not yet learned to trust stillness. She lay on the sleeping mat in the small building Sullie had given her and listened to the settlement sounds, the low movement of animals, the distant bark of a dog, the wind working through the thorn fence, and she went over every moment in the hall at Duncrag with the same thoroughness she had applied to planning it. She had done what she came to do. Roan was dead. She turned that fact over in her mind and waited for it to feel like something definitive. Like an ending. It did not feel like an ending. It felt like the moment after a fire goes out, when the air is still full of smoke and heat, and the shape of what burned is still visible in the dark. Roan was dead, but his wolves were not. His structure was not. The gathering had been full of pack alphas who had spent seasons learning to submit to his name, and the name being gone did not immediately teach them anything different. Someone would move to fill the space he had left. Someone always did. She stared at the roof of the building and thought about what Pell had said on the road. Go north eventually. I will rebuild something worth finding. She thought about Wren walking south through the trees with 2 seasons of grief and a lost daughter, and the particular purpose of a woman who had waited a long time for the right moment to act. She thought about Kora in the cave at the border, grinding things between flat stones and asking questions, and teaching a cast-out Omega that the wolf she had been ashamed of was the most honest thing about her. She thought about Bren and the pack circle and the dirt under her hands and the pack bond going out like a light. She did not feel angry about it anymore. It had burned clean somewhere on the road between the borderlands and Duncrag. What remained was simpler. A knowledge of what she was, and what she was capable of, and what she was willing to do with it. She closed her eyes. Outside, the settlement was quiet. She slept. 3 days after she arrived at the settlement, Wren walked through the gate. She came in the early morning, covered in road dust and moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who had been pushing hard for days and was running on will rather than rest. She saw Dara sitting outside Sullie's building and stopped, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Wren said, "The trackers lost me at the southern river crossing. I went through twice and doubled back, and they gave up before dawn yesterday." She looked around the settlement. "How long have you been here?" 3 days, Dara said. "Have you heard anything from the mountain?" "A trader came through yesterday. He said Duncrag is in conflict. Roan's 2 senior wolves are disputing the succession. The gathering broke apart the night of the haul. Our pack representatives left for their territories immediately." She paused. "He said there is a name being spoken across the packs. A story spreading faster than the trackers could travel." Wren sat down across from her. "What name?" Dara looked at her steadily. "Mine. Or rather, not mine. They are calling her the unrecognized wolf, the Omega with no mark who walked into the king's hall. Some packs are saying she was a spirit, some are saying she was an ancient wolf in human form sent by the first ancestors." She paused. "None of them know who she actually is." Wren almost smiled. "And you would like to keep it that way?" "It is more useful as a story than as a person," Dara said. "A person can be hunted. A story spreads and changes and cannot be caught." Wren looked at her for a long moment. "Kora taught you well." "You know Kora?" "I know of her. Every wolf who has spent time in the borderlands knows of her." Wren folded her hands in her lap. "She has been in those caves for 30 seasons. Some say she was cast out the same as you. Some say she chose the borderlands because she saw something coming and wanted to be outside it when it arrived." Dara thought about the old woman grinding things between flat stones. "Make sure you aim it at the right target." "She saw me coming," Dara said quietly. Wren nodded. "I think she has been preparing someone for a long time." Sullie came out of the building with food, and the 3 of them ate together in the early morning light without ceremony. It was a simple thing. 3 women sitting in the dirt of a border settlement eating dried grain and tough meat, and it carried no weight of significance except the significance of having survived to do it. After they ate, Sullie said, "What happens now?" It was the same question Pell had asked on the mountain road, and Dara had answered it then with what she knew about the immediate aftermath. But Sullie was asking something larger. Dara thought about it carefully before answering. "The packs will reorganize," she said. "Without Roan's pressure holding them in fear, the natural order will try to reassert itself. Some alphas will be strong enough to rebuild their packs properly. Some will try to claim Roan's power for themselves and become smaller versions of the same problem." She paused. "The packs that survived Roan's dissolution, the Marin, the Veth, the Dial, they will have to decide if they want to rebuild separately or find a different way to stand." "A different way," Sullie said. "What does that mean?" Dara looked at her. "It means what Roan built was wrong, not because he built it, but because he built it on fear and force, a structure built on that always falls eventually. But the idea of packs in cooperation, packs choosing to stand together without one alpha holding all the power, that is not a wrong idea. It is just one that has never been tried properly." Wren was watching her with the particular attention she had given her in the firewood yard at Duncrag. "You have been thinking about this for longer than the road from the mountain," Wren said. "Since Kora's cave," Dara admitted. She used to say that the problem with the ancient lands was never the wolves. It was the structure. One alpha at the top with all the others below. Everything depends on whether the one at the top was worthy. That is too much weight on one point. Any structure built that way will break when the point fails. Sullie leaned forward. And you think a different structure is possible? I think it has to be possible, Dara said, because the alternative is waiting for the next roan. The morning was fully light now. The settlement was waking around them, the sounds of people beginning their day, animals moving, fires being built up. Ordinary sounds, the sounds of a life that continued regardless of what happened at mountain fortresses and great halls. Wren stood slowly. There is something I did not tell you on the mountain road. I did not tell you because I did not know if you would survive long enough for it to matter. She looked down at Dara. Before Rowan dissolved the DL pack, I was not just a pack wolf. I was my alpha's speaker, the one who carried his words to other packs and brought their words back. She paused. I know every remaining pack elder between here and the Western Ridge. I have been to their settlements and eaten at their fires, and they trusted me because I spoke the truth even when the truth was uncomfortable. She paused again. If someone needed to bring a message to those elders, I could carry it to every one of them before the next full moon. Dara looked up at her. What message? She said. Wren looked at her steadily. That the unrecognized wolf is not a spirit or an ancestor. That she is a woman with a name and a plan and an invitation for every pack that wants to build something that does not depend on one point bearing all the weight. The three of them were quiet for a moment. A bird called somewhere above the thorn fence and went silent. I am an Omega, with no pack mark and a knife with old blood on it, Dara said. You are the woman who walked into Duncrag and changed the ancient lands before midday, Wren said. That is what they will hear, and they will listen. Dara went back to Kora before she went anywhere else. She walked the borderland roads alone because the roads were safer now than they had been 2 seasons past. Rowan's checkpoints dissolved the moment news of his death reached his outer wolves, and many of whom simply walked away from their posts and returned to whatever packs they had come from. The ancient lands were in the particular suspended state of a thing that has just broken and not yet decided what shape it will take when it settles. She reached Kora's cave on a morning of low cloud and cold air and found the old woman exactly where she had left her, sitting beside a fire, grinding something between flat stones. Kora looked up when she walked in and said, "Sit." Dara sat. They were quiet for a long time. The fire between them was the same kind of fire it had always been, small and practical, giving heat without waste. Outside the cave, the borderland trees moved in the wind. "You aimed well," Kora said finally. "You knew what I was going to do when I left," Dara said. "I knew what you were capable of. I did not know what you would choose." Kora set the grinding stone down. "There is a difference. I never prepared you for a specific action. I prepared you to be capable of your own choices. What you chose was yours, entirely." Dara looked at the fire. "There is more to do. There is always more to do. I mean something specific. The packs. Wren can reach the elders. Sullie knows the Maran survivors. Pell is rebuilding in the north." She paused. "But someone has to be at the center of it. Someone the packs will come to when they cannot agree. Someone who is not an Alpha King but something different." Kora watched her carefully. "I am an Omega with no pack," Dara said. "You keep saying that as if it means what it used to mean," Kora said. Before you walked into that hall, Omega meant the bottom, the cast-out. Oh, the one with no place. She paused. Now it means the woman who walked in with nothing and left with everything changed. Words carry what people put into them. You just put something new into that word. Dara was quiet for a long time. Come with me, she said. Kora looked at her with something that was almost surprising. In 30 seasons in those caves, Dara suspected no one had asked the old woman that. I am old, Kora said. You are the oldest and most capable wolf I have ever encountered. And I need someone who has already seen everything fail once to help me build something that will not. Kora picked up the grinding stone again. She worked it in slow circles for a long moment. Then she set it down and stood with the particular care of a woman whose body had accumulated many seasons, but whose will had not. Oh, I will need to bring my stones, she said. Bring whatever you need, Dara said. They left the cave 2 days later, the four of them eventually, Kora and Dara going east to meet Ren and Sullie, and then north to find Pell. It was not an army. It was not a pack in the old sense. It was 4 women, 1 young man, and an iron knife with old blood still in the grain of the handle. But the ancient lands were listening. The story had travelled faster than any of them had walked. At every settlement they passed through on the road north, people had already heard it. The details changed with each telling, as stories always did, growing in some places and shrinking in others, but the core of it remained the same in every version. A woman no one recognised, a hall full of power, a blade that did not hesitate. Some pack wolves came to watch them pass, some came to walk beside them for a stretch of road before returning to their settlements. Some joined and did not go back. By the time they reached the Northern Territory where Pell had begun gathering the scattered Veth wolves, they numbered nearly 40. Not warriors, not a formed pack. Something harder to name and therefore harder to oppose. Pell was standing at the edge of the settlement he had started building when they came over the northern ridge. He looked at the group behind Dara, and for a moment he simply stood there. Then he said, I told you to come north. I did not expect you to bring everyone. Not everyone, Dara said. Not yet. He looked at her face and at the people behind her and at Kora walking at her shoulder with her grinding stones wrapped in hide and hanging from a strap. And he made the expression of a man who had hoped for something and was now confronted with the reality of it, and finding the reality larger than the hope. What do we call this? He said. This thing you are building? Dara thought about Kora's words. Words carry what people put into them. She thought about the pack circle and the dirt under her hands and the hollow where the bond used to be. She thought about the hollow filling slowly with something different over the long road, something that did not depend on an alpha's voice or a mark burned into skin. We call it a council, she said. Every pack has a voice. No single wolf holds the higher seat. What decisions are made together or they are not made at all. Pell looked at her for a long moment. And who leads the council? Dara looked back at the people who had walked north with her. Ren, who knew every elder between here and the western ridge. Sullie, who carried the Maran pack mark without apology and had survived everything Roan had done to her pack and came out the other side still upright. Kora, who had outlived more alphas than anyone could count and kept her grinding stones and her questions and her fire burning through all of it. She looked back at Pell. No one leads it, she said. That is the entire point. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once, slowly, the nod of someone accepting an idea that was going to be very difficult and very necessary in equal measure. "Come in," he said. "We have food and a fire and a great deal of work to do." They came in. Seasons later, when pack elders told the story to their young ones, the version they told always began in the same place. Not with a king falling, not with a blade. It began with a casting. A woman in the dirt of a pack circle with the bond going out of her chest. They told it that way because that was where it actually started. Not in the great hall at Duncrag, but in the moment she rose from the dirt with nothing and chose to keep walking. The Omega no one recognised. The blade no one saw coming. The council that rose from the space a king left behind. And the cast-out wolf with no mark and one old knife had walked into the most powerful hall in the ancient lands, that no one had recognised her, that it had not mattered at all. Tell us in the comments, which moment hit you hardest? The casting, the blade, or the council? Drop it below and tell us where you are watching from. If this story moved something in you, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with us. There are more stories where this one came from, and we are just getting started.